So, Dennis Lehane, it has been years since your last Kenzie-Gennaro novel, Prayers for Rain, and you left us hanging.
No, I didn't.
You don't think you left us hanging?
No, it was closure. They get together, it's all good.
So what made you decide it was time to revisit those characters, and why did you decide to follow up on Amanda McCready's story?
I very rarely decide the books, they tend to decide me. My line about Patrick and Angie was always that they'd stop talking to me, and that if they ever knocked on the door again, I would welcome them in with open arms, because they bought my first house for me.
Right.
So Patrick started talking to me about it. It was right as I was touring for the given day. It started popping in my head. And I played around with various ideas, and I didn't like any of them. And then I thought, oh, well, of course, this should be about the case they never got closure on.
Right. Well, and speaking of the case they never got closure on, it seems like a lot of your work focuses on issues of sin and redemption and the struggle to do what's right even when maybe what's right is not completely clear.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this issue so important to you?
Well, A, because I think morality is a choice. I think we have some innate base morality that separates us from the animals, but then after that, it's all choice. And it's all, in some degrees, fashion, and in some cases, it's an addiction to feeling morally superior. I mistrust conventional wisdom on issues of morality. I just simply do. And when I write, I tend to look at issues where, if I'm looking at a social issue, I tend to want to pick things that I don't know how I feel about.
Right.
Or things that are not necessarily easily swept under the rug or easily decided.
Right.
So God May Be Gone was, yeah, you go and you rescue a kid, but what if the people who took her are actually better parents than the people she was with? Well, then people say very clearly, women tend to say, well, so Patrick very obviously made the wrong decision, and they're always shocked, my wife included, when I said, no, he made the right decision. He makes an argument very clear in the book where he says, if we allow people to just kidnap kids because they don't like how they're being raised, well, what happens when those people say don't like it if the parent is gay? We have laws for a reason. We have society for a reason.
Right.
The idea is that you can't make decisions like this from an emotional place. Is there a bad side to that? Of course, that's why I write about it. But Mr. Griffith was the same. What if all evidence pointed to somebody having killed your daughter? And then you took the law into your own hands, which is a very American concept. And you went off and you did the thing that you're supposed to do, where you right the wrongs that society won't right, and then the punchline is, you were wrong.
Both Mystic River and God May Be Gone made me struggle as a reader. And another thing they struggle with is, back from A Drink Before the War,
right.
You know, killing the pimp.
Yeah, they've done some bad things.
The hard thing is, for me as a reader, I felt like it was the right thing to do. But you make the point very clearly that there was no actual reason to do it at the time. At the time,
there was a little bit. You can see that he's a threat to one little kid. And that was a sort of a commentary that Patrick has. It's been a long time since I thought about that book, but I seem to remember Patrick says at the end, the people who are truly behind the crime, the power brokers behind the crime, the worst that happens to them is that they're indicted, and then they just say no comment, no comment, no comment, no comment. But the black guy dies.
Right.
And that was certainly one of the points of the book, was the white guys walk away to some degree, and the black guy dies.
Well, in talking about this sort of isolated, outcast type of society, I know that before you became a full-time writer, you worked with abused children and mentally handicapped children and sort of marginalized members of society. Do you feel like that has sort of informed your point of view?
Yeah, I think also growing up working class, I think growing up the child of immigrants, seeing how immigrants are treated. Yeah, there's been a lot that gave me the chip on my shoulder that I have about issues of class in this society. Eugene Debs had a line, where there is an underclass, I'm of it. I would say to my wife that the moment, because obviously I make good money now, and I can go to nice places and I can do nice things, and she'll say, I feel a little uncomfortable, like when we go to like a 5-star restaurant or something like that. And I'll say, so do I, you know. And the moment you feel comfortable is a problem.
Really?
Yeah.
So the moment you feel like you've been absorbed.
The moment you're all the way in, there's some part of you that doesn't feel a little bit ridiculous, having a $56 steak, or you know what I mean?
Right.
Then you're over. You know, William Friedkin, the director of The French Connection, he had this great line, I've never forgotten it. He was talking to a friend of his, they were both building tennis courts in their homes in Hollywood. And in this moment, he suddenly stopped and he said, I have nothing left to give as an artist.
Really?
If I'm sitting here talking about tennis courts, I have nothing left to give as an artist.
Done.
And in some ways it's true, he's a very capable director now, but he's not the guy who did friggin' French Connection.
Well, I just made you go back to A Drink Before the War, and you said you haven't thought about it in a long time, but I wanted to take you back there again for just a minute. When you started writing this series, did you plan it out?
No.
You didn't know where you were going with it?
No. I never knew anything. I remember with The Drink Before the War, I guess it sort of became a template. I knew who was going to die, and I knew why she was going to die. And that was it. That's all I knew. And she dies on, I think, page 90, and then the book goes to page 260 or whatever, and it's solved, and you're out. I finished the book, and my girlfriend at the time read it and said, this could be a series. And I was like, I wasn't even thinking about it that way, you know? And I started thinking about it, and we wrote it thinking about it that way a little bit. And then I thought, oh, okay, maybe I can do something with these characters again, we'll see. You know, but again, I just read the book. I mean, I didn't expect it to be published. I didn't know it was going to get me an agent. I didn't know anything.
Right. Well, you've written some fairly memorable characters. One of the most memorable to me is Bubba Rogowski.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
What's that? Where did he come from?
I
kind of love him.
People do. I love Bubba. You gotta love Bubba. You know, I just grew up with a lot of guys who were a few cans short of a six-pack, and I had this weird thing since I was really young. I'm just not terribly good at judging people. I'm not comfortable judging people unless you do something really heinous, and then I'm like, wow, you're a douchebag. But it's not something that I'm really good at. So I ended up kind of attracting these people because they never felt judged by me. These are the guys who end up in jail. Like, you know, there's something inherently sweet about them. I don't know. There's just something very childlike about them. Well, Bubba's a dog. Bubba's a dog.
Right.
I've always thought of him as a dog. Actually, it was funny because we were talking recently. I realized that the line I used to describe Bubba, I think I've used it now 3 times. It's in Moonlight Mile too. He's described as the size of a young rhino on its back legs. But he loves Patrick and Angie. That's his redeeming quality.
And he becomes a real fleshed out, fully developed, 3-dimensional character, I think, in Prayers for Rain when we see him in his element.
Yeah, I didn't like that though. I didn't think he became 3-dimensional. I think it became borderline cartoon.
I liked him.
Yeah, everybody did. I just was like, ooh, it was just very close to jumping the shark there. It was very close.
I think he stayed on the right side of the shark.
It's a very different thing to do because at the end of the day, I would argue he's a flat character. Even if I make him vivid and bring you into his life, he's still not 3-dimensional. He's not going to change. He's not going to learn much about himself. He just is who he is. It makes him fun. It makes him fun to plug into the narrative. And at the end of the day, we all want a Bubba. Everybody would love to have a Bubba.
You have this really fantastically successful series, and then along comes Mystic River in the middle of this.
Yeah.
And it's the first one of your books to be made into a movie.
Yeah.
And
it's also the first book that was really successful, to be honest.
Was it really?
They did okay, but they weren't making any big noise. I'd never had a bestseller, to put it in perspective.
Really?
And Mystic River had a bestseller.
So what was that experience like for you, watching this train pick up speed off the tracks?
Strange, very strange. You have to understand, it was Mystic River, which I never thought was going to be successful. It was a smash out of the gate. It stayed on the bestsellers forever and ever and ever, not forever and ever, 3 months. And
it's a long time.
It's a long time. And then within the midst of that, Clint Eastwood comes along and says, I want to do this. And then that's immediately in motion. The movie was out within 2 years of the publication of the book. Within that time frame, from publishing the book in 2001 and exactly 2 years later, I sat on Warner Brothers' lot and saw the film. I definitely had some growing pains when it came to figuring out how to adapt to it. There's a lot going on in my life at that point too. My first marriage had just broken up. There was a lot of very tough stuff going on. So it was an interesting ride.